Hello.
Hello, is that Si Cranston?
Speaking.
Hello, this is Lee from Heartfm Spain here.
Hello, mate. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad.
Oops.
Fantastic. That's all right. Just got my guitar in the background here.
Oh, you don't want to do that. They break when you do that.
just as long as there's any clangs of the guitar that they're in tune. That was my concern there.
First of all, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about your sort of original influences. I guess your father was the biggest one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my brother and myself, growing up as kids, we in our house, my parents had a massive record collection and a pretty capable hi-fi system parked right in the lounge. And the only music you were allowed to play beyond a certain level was sort of ska and rock steady music that was played back in my dad's clubs. So that was just something that those were like the rules of the house. You couldn't. So, even though there was all the modern day pop music of the late 80s and 90s that my brother and me as kids wanted to play, sort of classic ska and reggae was the only music that sort of ever got really cranked up in our house, because that was like what my dad allowed, and those were the rules. And I guess we were kind of, I guess, intrigued and curious about this ruling, but we certainly weren't upset about it, because we loved the fact that we could play our old our parents' records from back in the day, and they sounded great, and it was like an education, really. It became like a training ground for us, and as kids growing up, it sort of rubs off on you into your teenage years, and just that was the sort of music that we decided that we wanted to make and do as a band, and as teenagers became singers, and from there we sort of formed a band, and then the whole thing just kind of naturally continued from that.
Now, your dad was actually involved in the promotion of ska and reggae in the UK during the 60s, and also a bit later, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was just, again, it was one of these things. He'd just come out of the Merchant Navy. He was looking for something to do that was fun. There were kind of interests and certain private parties that he'd been to whereby they were playing ska and reggae, which he enjoyed. And that was a part of his social group, the group that he moved in. So he just went on to sort of search out some venues to maybe put this out to a wider audience, which he did, and managed to source a few venues around South London, got tickets made up, and promoted the night, just word of mouth in the circle that he moved in. Word soon got around South London that there were these ska reggae nights going on, and it became the sort of cool thing of the back end of the 60s to be a part of. And it just went from strength to strength. One club became two, and I think he ended up with about 4 or 5 after a while, and had to call his brother in and get his friends in to help out. And the whole thing sort of became like the booming underground sound of South London.
No, I remember this because at this time I was actually in Birmingham. The same sort of thing was happening there with ska and reggae and blue beat and lovers rock and all that as it became later. Growing up in that sort of environment, was it easy for you to find others that wanted to play that music when you decided to form a band yourselves?
Well, yeah, I mean, it wasn't easy. I mean, it is easy, I guess, to find musicians that want to go out and earn money at venues. That's the easy part. The hard part is to really find musicians that understand the music and get a vibe for it, because I think you do need that. And what we did in the early days is we'd pull musicians in, and we'd literally have to train them. We'd give them, a selection of classic ska old school reggae to listen to. Which, they kind of have an idea, but when you say sort of ska to most people, they kind of go, oh yeah, I know Madness, I know the two-tone sound, which is a great sound, but it wasn't really what we originally set out to portray in the early kind of jeweler, recordings. So we kind of did it. We did have to sort of educate, or at least guide people down the road of that classic world, and specifically to try and achieve the sounds we wanted. We didn't just want to carbon copy old school reggae, ska and reggae songs, but what we did want to do was to at least portray an authenticity, of the backbone to that music, and then apply our melodies to it, and come up with a sound of our own, which is what the Jewelers eventually became, and have been sort of reasonably successful with.
Now, it's funny, isn't it? Because you could almost draw an analogy with blues music, because you've got artists who are over in the UK that pick up on a music which is closer to the States than it is to the UK, and yet it becomes embraced over here and really, in the UK, I mean, we're in Spain, but in the UK, and really, really takes off big time. Is this something you were aware of?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge musical enthusiast in terms of musical history. I'm fascinated by it, and I love to talk about it. I love to study it. I love the origins of rock and roll, which came from the blues, and then you've got the rock and roll which influenced the Jamaicans to go out and create their version of it, which was the ska sound, Jamaican rock and roll. And then from ska, it eventually slowed down in Jamaica and became the rock steady sound, which eventually became the reggae sound. So absolutely, and territorially, it is fascinating that you've got Jamaica, which is parked under the nose of America, if you like, in comparison to where it's situated in relation to the UK, and yet it was the UK that seemed to embrace the classic sounds of Jamaica in the early days, a lot more so than America did at the time. And I think that wasn't an intentional thing that America kind of did. I just think that it was that America had so much going on. It had its own, it had so much stuff pouring out of itself. It had so much stuff pouring in from the UK in terms of what the young kids in the UK that came out with during the 60s. There was this whole UK invasion going on in America. And I just think that there just wasn't the space really for Jamaican music at that time. But then as the years have gone by, so America, you'll find a lot of these re-released Jamaican records appearing by kind of American record labels that have picked up on it now and are beginning to ship it around the States. But it's always remained this kind of quiet thing. It never really surfaced in the States from my studying of the history of Jamaican music in the way that it did in the UK, both as an underground sound. I mean, there were these underground clubs that my dad was obviously a part of, and it also made a pretty heavy and respectable appearance in the UK charts, towards the back end of the 60s and early 70s. You had the whole Trojan sound coming through, artists like Greyhound, Ken Booth, to name but a few, that were sort of scoring hits. So absolutely, the UK has been a much more of a featured country for the success of Jamaican music in the early days than, like you said earlier, than America has. And that's just a fascinating thing. It's just probably by chance. It's that guy that had a box full of records that happened to pull up on one shore as opposed to another, and the rest is rock and roll history.